Welcome to Sleepy Tales. My name is Mateus, and before we begin today's story, I'd like to invite you to subscribe to our channel and leave a comment below saying, "I'll sleep well tonight." Now, sit back, relax, and let's dive into tonight's tale. The Johnson family had always dreamed of escaping the hustle and bustle of city life and finding peace in the countryside. So, when they stumbled upon an old, secluded house in the middle of the woods, they felt like it was meant to be. The house was big, with plenty of room for everyone, and surrounded by a beautiful garden. It seemed like the perfect place to start their new life. As they settled into their new home, the Johnsons were filled with a sense of excitement and anticipation. The first few days were peaceful, with nothing but the sound of birds chirping and the gentle breeze rustling through the trees. But then, things started to change. One afternoon, while unpacking boxes in the living room, Mrs. Johnson heard a creaking noise. She looked up and saw the door to the attic slowly opening on its own. She called out to her husband, but he was outside working in the garden and didn't hear her. She decided to investigate on her own, but as she climbed up the narrow staircase, she heard a strange whispering sound that sent shivers down her spine. When she reached the top, she found nothing but darkness and silence. A few days later, Mr. Johnson was working in the basement when he heard footsteps above him. He assumed it was one of his children, but when he went upstairs to check, he found the whole house empty. The doors to the bedrooms were closed, and there was no sign of anyone having been there. He tried to brush it off as his imagination, but the feeling of unease lingered. The children, too, began to notice strange occurrences around the house. They heard whispering and giggling coming from the walls and saw shadows moving in the corners of their eyes. They tried to ignore it at first, but as the incidents became more frequent and unsettling, they began to worry. Despite the odd happenings, the Johnsons tried to convince themselves that it was just their imagination playing tricks on them. But as the days went by, they couldn't shake the feeling that something was not quite right about their new home. And they were about to find out just how right they were. As the days went by, the strange occurrences in the Johnsons' house became more frequent and intense. Objects would move on their own, doors would slam shut, and the whispers in the walls became louder and more distinct. The family members couldn't help but feel like they were being watched, and their unease turned into full-blown fear. One night, as the family sat in the living room watching TV, they heard a loud banging noise coming from upstairs. Mr. Johnson decided to investigate, but as he climbed the stairs, he felt an icy chill run down his spine. When he reached the top of the staircase, he saw a figure standing at the end of the hallway. It was a woman in a white dress, with long, flowing hair that covered her face. Mr. Johnson couldn't see her features, but he could feel her staring at him. He tried to speak, but his voice caught in his throat. The figure disappeared into thin air, leaving him shaking and terrified. The children's bedrooms became a particular hotspot for paranormal activity. They would wake up in the middle of the night to find their toys arranged in strange patterns or their clothes thrown all over the room. They could hear scratching noises coming from under their beds and the feeling of something breathing on their necks. One night, as the family was sitting down for dinner, they heard a loud crash coming from upstairs. They rushed to investigate and found that the door to the attic was wide open. They cautiously climbed the stairs and were shocked to find a strange symbol drawn in blood on the floor. The symbol was unfamiliar to them, but it filled them with a sense of dread and foreboding. The Johnsons began to research the history of their house, and what they found sent shivers down their spines. They discovered that the previous owner had been a notorious witch who had been executed for practicing dark magic. Rumors circulated that she had cursed the house before she died, and that her spirit still haunted the halls. As the Johnsons delved deeper into the history of their home, they began to realize that they were in grave danger. The witch's curse was becoming more and more powerful, and they were trapped in a house that had become a portal to the other side. They knew that they had to find a way to break the curse before it was too late. But time was running out, and the witch's hold on their home was getting stronger by the day. The Johnsons knew that they had to find a way to break the curse that had been placed on their house. They consulted with experts in paranormal activity and dark magic, but no one seemed to have a solution. The family felt like they were running out of options and time. One night, as they were sitting in the living room, they heard a blood-curdling scream coming from upstairs. They ran to investigate and found that the symbol in the attic had grown in size and was now glowing red. The house was shaking and the walls were cracking. The family knew that they had to act fast. Mrs. Johnson remembered something she had read in a book about breaking curses. She suggested that they perform a cleansing ritual to rid the house of the witch's curse. They had nothing to lose and everything to gain. They gathered all the supplies they needed and headed to the attic. As they performed the ritual, the house shook even harder and the screams grew louder. But they persevered, and after what felt like hours, the ritual was complete. The house fell silent. The walls stopped shaking and the symbol in the attic disappeared. The Johnsons looked at each other, exhausted but relieved. They had broken the curse, and they could finally live in peace. The family members never forgot their experience in the haunted house. They knew that they had been lucky to survive, and they made sure to warn others about the dangers of dabbling in dark magic. As for the house, it remained empty for years. Rumors circulated that it was still haunted, and that the witch's curse had not been fully broken. But the Johnsons knew that they had done all they could to protect themselves and future occupants of the house. In the end, the family moved on, but the memory of their haunted house would stay with them forever. They had learned that sometimes the past can come back to haunt us, and that not all dreams are worth pursuing. Thank you for listening to this bedtime story, and remember, if you struggle with falling or staying asleep at night, click on the first link in the description for the ultimate solution to your problem. Now, choose one of these two videos and continue on our journey in the world of bedtime stories.